it's good to see a lot of familiar faces today. Hey, how you guys doing? It's a long day, huh? So today we have three amazing speakers. All of them are former founders and successful investors. So I like to do a very quick high-level introductions for them, and then we can dive deeper into the questions. So let's start with Rech on the far right. So Rech is the venture capitalist at AME Cloud Ventures, and previously he started the very first blog website company in Taiwan, which got acquired by Yahoo. And in the middle, we have Kai, who is currently a managing partner at 886 Studio. And previously, he was a founder of Blue Goji and also Red Octane, which is famous for the Guitar Hero game, and it got acquired by Activision. And finally, we have Wu Fu. I had a hard time trying to summarize his achievements, so I would say he's a startup founding machine. So he started dozens of companies, including very successful VC funds and so many different semiconductor companies, which got IPO'd around the world, basically in the US, in Taiwan, also in China. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first question to all the panelists, tell us about yourself more and how did you guys get into startup investing from a founder? Let's start with Rech.
Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for having me and thanks for joining. So like Austin just mentioned, I basically started a company by accident because before founding my company, I didn't have any work experience. I started a career basically as an entrepreneur. So, and again, becoming an investor is also an accident because my company was acquired by Yahoo, and because of that, I got relocated to the Silicon Valley. I get to know Jerry, and I didn't plan for that, but when I got to here, it's an eye-opening event for me, right? Because in Taiwan back then, like 10 years ago, or maybe 20 years ago already, the early stage funding wasn't as active as in here, but now it's definitely improving. So I have this hypothesis in order for me to figure out why there are so many startups, so many companies here. I have to get deep, right, in the water. So I have to get to understand how VC works here. So I bring this hypothesis and then quit Yahoo and went to Stanford for this business degree. And while at the same time, Jerry was also starting a VC firm. So I basically working for him after I finished my business degree, and it's been about 8 years now. So pretty much it's all by accident.
Okay.
I guess a lot of things have been by accident as well. And it's a privilege to be here with all of you guys on this panel. And all of you, thank you guys in the audience. I would consider myself an entrepreneur at heart. That's what I love to do. I love to start companies. I'm an operator. I've done that a lot. I've started 5 companies in the last 20 years, and that's really my passion. So I love to operate. I love to build. It's hard. It's hard as crap. You know, it's never easy. You would think that after a handful of times, Wu Fu is perhaps one of the greatest entrepreneurs that has ever existed in the world, and how many companies that you've started, but it never gets easy. I don't know if it gets easier for you, but it never gets easier for me. But that's what I love to do. And so I guess I'm stupid in that way. I keep doing those things that are hard. I came across into investing sort of very accidentally as well, right? It's mostly just kind of a passion. And I say as an investor, and I don't classify myself as an investor because Wu Fu and Rich, like, they're real investors. I'm just an angel investor, and I enjoy investing in companies. But the reason I do it is I really, as an entrepreneur myself, I really love giving back to the ecosystem. You know, I always say that, you know, when I was young and naive and a lot less experienced than I am now, someone invested in me. And so now it's my turn to kind of give back and invest in the ecosystem. And I do feel like that is one of the super unique things about Silicon Valley, and what makes Silicon Valley such a different place than I think almost anywhere else in the world. That there's a lot of entrepreneurs, and at some point, if they've been lucky and they've exited and they were successful and all of that, they really give back into the ecosystem. And it's not just about like money, but it's also about time. And so one thing I always say is, if the super smart, I don't care, almost Silicon Valley, I don't care how big you've gotten, and you could be a billionaire, 100 billionaire, like whatever, 10 billionaire, 100 billionaire, right? I think almost everyone that I've met, at least, if you figured out a way to reach them, they'll give you 15 minutes, right? It's not always easy to reach them, right? But if you figure out a way to reach them, they'll give you time. And then that capital also is another thing that is kind of recycles back into the ecosystem, right? Like, okay, I'm gonna, as an angel investor, I'm gonna recycle that capital back into the ecosystem. And so again, for me, that's how I think about investing. It's, somebody invested in me, I'm investing back into the ecosystem. I think that's really one of the things that makes Silicon Valley just completely almost unique from everywhere else in the world, right? And that's what makes it so successful.
Yeah. Thank you, Kai. And Wu-Fu?
Okay, well, today I'm the only one with gray hair. But these days, having gray hair doesn't help. So I'm here to share and also to learn. I guess how do I get into, actually my career is going through the startup, entrepreneur, and moving to become what I call EVCO in Chinese. I call it 投创 instead of 创投. Of course, nobody wants 创投, right? Anyway, so the way I become an entrepreneur is also by accident. Everything's by accident or by fate, I guess. Well, I actually failed my PhD exam in Berkeley. And then the first time I failed, I decided I left, and then I want to go out and learn my English better, which I still couldn't learn it well. and then I was planning to go back to get my PhD, but probably too late now. Anyway, so the job I find actually is a job in marketing support. The reason that I want a chance to talk, even though to make sure they will understand me someday. But in that job, and I actually, one of nine was an experienced salesperson, and he told me, which changed my life from that point on. He said, well, you are a young guy, and the company hire you to sit in the back office to keep you alive, but you never will make much more money than that. He told me just it's called money string theory. The closer you are to the money, the easier you could get it. And I went back that night and think hard. How do I get closer to the money? In fact, I was marketing support. My company actually is doing the banking terminal for bank. My supporting office right next to a bank. So I'm really close to the money. But I still couldn't figure out a good way to get it. And after a while, finally I gave up, saying, well, then what do I do? And to go into a big company to move up to closer to money with my culture and language barrier, it takes a long time. It's not impossible, it takes a long time. And then finally I figured out, well, getting into a startup is the easiest way. Once I have started a company, doesn't matter what I speak. I could speak Taiwanese or Mandarin. They will try to learn, try to understand me, right, if I'm the boss. But the issue, though, is even though that I have no money to start a company, and I have no experience to start a company. So what do I do next? And so back then, I think about, well, the only thing I have is my youth, or 青春, okay, but as a man, it doesn't worth much money at all. So I think some other way. So I think if I could start a company myself, and I would prepare for that. So I end up investing. I decided it's really the day I'm going to invest 10 years my time to get ready for startup. And so I went through that process. I don't want to go through too long, but in fact, I ended up starting my first company after 8 years, so which is ahead of my schedule already. So that's why I wanted to get into entrepreneurship, and I enjoyed it. So I started more than a dozen companies over years. And after that, in year around 2000, which is my 50th birthday, I said, well, that's enough for me. And I kind of switched to try to becoming a coach instead of what I call instead of entrepreneur, I would become the Viagra for entrepreneur. So to help them desire performance and satisfaction, I guess. Right. So that's what I did. And so what I call, I'm not a VC. I'm still today, I don't consider my major interest is investment. It's really helping entrepreneur. And probably like Kyle or whatever. So it really, that's what I do. And I think this is the area where help to any startup and wants to help, I will try to help. And this is called, I call it EVC, Entrepreneur VC or 投创. Another way I classify VC and EVC, and maybe that is new, even earlier stage like Kai is doing, is called venture building. So in Chinese, we could call separate into VC 是穿皮鞋, EVC 是穿布鞋. This venture creation 穿草鞋. So that's how how close to entrepreneurship. Okay, okay, that's it for now.
I'll also add, Wu Fu is so modest, but I think you've started literally like probably dozens of companies too, right? Just one real quick question, but what's most impressive is your batting average. Like my batting average is horrible, like at startups, right? I've started a bunch, but like my batting average is not that great. But your batting average is like 90%. Like you've sold or made public like 75% of the companies you've started. So what's the secret? Sorry. I just have to ask him. I have to ask him. The man's amazing.
That's a good question.
You are not in the audience, are you?
Just steal it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think
that's a good question.
I approve.
Yeah.
All right. I think, first of all, I mentioned already, I didn't have time to go through. I spent my 10 years to get ready. I did not go out and start a company right out of college or out of my school. And also, I guess really the timing is one way. Today, the people talk about paradigm shift. I really encounter the paradigm shift in technology, which is from circuit switching to packet switching. But later on, we'll talk about other things. That now, I'm seeing that technology paradigm shift, moving become business model paradigm shift, which is what our building was building highway and just basic infrastructure, networking infrastructure. Then the business paradigm shift, it happened in Yahoo or those Google and those, it changed the business model. But right now, we will talk about later, maybe now we are seeing a paradigm shift, even greater, which is called lifestyle paradigm shift.
Yep, thank you, Fu. Yeah, so I can really resonate with the giving back to the community and coaching startup founders, because before Fujitsu, I was actually a founder myself in the AI space, and I consulted Kai a few times about how to operate my business, and also Rich about the investment criteria and how they evaluate startup deals as a VC, and of course, Ufu, just his experience on starting different businesses and exits. So going back through your own history, what's the one thing that you wished that you knew when you first started your company? Maybe we can start with Wu Fu.
Wow, there are too many of them. I don't know which one, but I think that if you're sitting today now, or probably 10 years ago, I would see the biggest thing I seeing happening now, rather than which is globally, is those pandemic, of course, is 天灾. But right now, the deglobalization is really the biggest issue now. And this thing could create a major impact to a new whoever starting a business should pay attention to that. But for myself, though, the thing that the first mistake I probably make is I wish I knew better is that I actually was an engineer in training, and even though I went through 10-year preparation, but the first company I started, basically we have a technical team. And I was a VP of engineering, and I leading a technical team to start a company. So what I didn't realize that much is that right now we focus on technology-driven. In the startup, it's more important. I won't say, I think it's not more important, or as important is knowing the marketing, or knowing not just how to do it, but you have to know what to do. But without knowing what to do it, well, how you do it, how well, it doesn't matter.
Thank you. And Kai?
Yeah, I'll say the same thing. I mean, I've like countless lessons that I could share with you guys because I've made so many mistakes in my lifetime. But I will say, you know, sort of looking at the venture capital landscape and the funding landscape, the one lesson in like terrible failure was I was really too naive at the time to understand like venture capital. Like I just thought, hey, you know, I'm doing cool stuff. Like we're making money. Shouldn't people invest in us, right? And we went up and down Sand Hill Road and tried to raise money. I mean, I talked to literally hundreds of investors, and they all turned us down, right? So with Red Octane, which is, you know, the Guitar Hero company, which is probably the biggest success that I had, we went up and down Sand Hill Road and tried to get investors to invest in our company, and nobody would. We actually never raised institutional money over the life of the company, which
you did not talk to me, though.
which was good and bad, good and bad. But it was painful at the time. But I think now that I've been on the investing side a little bit, and now that I have a lot of friends, right, who are investors, who, you know, I talk to and kind of understand a little bit, there's like so many nuances to the investor ecosystem that you have to understand, right? First of all, we were doing, at that time, we were in games. Okay, investors don't like the game industry. Why? It's a hits-driven business, right? It's how do you model a hits-driven business? It's just going to be like this or like 1 or 0, right? It's very difficult to model a hits-driven business. I can model a SaaS business. You got X number of customers, X number of dollars. But, you know, rewind the clock to when we started the company. It's very hard to model a hits-driven business. And then we were doing music games. Oh, what is that? Never heard of it back then, right? Is that a category? Does anybody, you know, what is that even? And then we did hardware in Silicon Valley. Oh God, no. Nobody touches hardware, right? We don't touch hardware. We don't invest in hardware companies, consumer hardware. And so we hit on all these things, but I was a little bit too naive at the time to quite understand all of those things. So that was a tremendous failure on my part because I spent a lot of time trying to raise money, but also just trying to understand, like, why won't they invest in us, right? Why won't they invest in this company? But now, a little bit more experienced, being on the other side, okay, I get like, okay, this is the criteria, this is what you're doing. You can't just like spray across everybody, every investor, right, around and hope that they're going to invest. You have to understand, okay, what's the investor profile? What are they looking for? What are the things that are interesting? What are the things that they'll do? And then you get into even nuances of like, if you want to get into like, okay, there's a lifetime of the fund, and are you at the beginning or are you at the end, right? Because, you know, 3 years into the fund, they're not investing in new companies anymore. They're only supporting existing companies. There's all kinds of little nuances, which I didn't understand when I was younger in trying to raise money. But I think I've gotten a little bit smarter now. And so when I talk to people now, of course, okay, who are you looking at? What's the profile? What is interesting? Understand the actual fund and the life of the fund and where they are and the VC and all of those things. But back then, it was just like scratching my head. Why won't they invest in us? You know, it was a challenging time.
Yeah. Thank you. And Rich?
Yeah, so I really like what Kai just said. You know, I was once also very young and naive, and didn't know what I was doing, and make a lot of mistakes. So sometimes I would joke with Jerry, like if we look ourselves back in the time, will we invest in ourselves? The answer is definitely no, right? We were investing in others, but not ourselves, because we were too naive. And we know ourselves, we made a lot of mistakes. Maybe our investor didn't know, and we wouldn't tell them, right? So, but I mean, seriously, when I look at it, and I look at a lot of founders right now, when they come to me, right, they didn't have we have looked at a lot of different things, and we know a lot of mistakes, and we will try to share with that. That's how we give to the community, so that they can avoid, they can save some time, they can focus on things that really matters. And one key strength I feel like you cannot, like when you age, you start to lose is being naive. It's actually now I recognize as strength, and I keep reminding myself. It's actually being naive allow you, like enable you to not afraid of making mistakes. It's like how I watch my kids learn any sports, right? Skateboarding, they fail, they just stand up again and try to skate again. They are not afraid. Like I remember myself, I made a lot of mistakes and I was not embarrassed, right? Now I feel embarrassed for the mistake I made before, but I wasn't embarrassed. So I can learn quickly. So nowadays I still keep reminding myself when I face founders, if they didn't know like some other business practice or best practice, whatever, I can share with them my mistakes. And the key strengths they have is keep being naive. So you can learn very quickly, right? You can learn other things, other people mistake from others. But being naive is actually, I would think it's a very good gift for any entrepreneur so that they can stand out quickly, they can learn fast. That's a key differentiation founders have from other people, right? Not afraid of making mistakes.
Yeah, I actually say that a lot as well. Like, if you want to be evolutionary, you can, and if you've been in the space, and I've been in the gaming space for a long time in other spaces, and I can be evolutionary. But if you want to be revolutionary, you got to really start with a blank slate, right? It's like you're going to change the game, and you have no idea what the game is. Because if you already know the game, like me, I'm so jaded in this space. I'm just like, oh, this is going to work. This is not going to work. And maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong, right? But I have a preconceived notion of what's going on. Yeah. But if you want to be that's evolutionary. But if you want to be revolutionary, you really start with a blank slate. I have no idea if this is going to work or not, but then somehow you do it, and it changes the game, yeah. Right? And I think it's the same kind of sentiment that you're talking about.
Thank you. Can't agree more. So putting on your investor's hat, because you guys obviously are successful entrepreneurs, and when you look at startups, what qualities do you look for them in the startup founding team? Maybe we can start with Rich.
Yeah, so, I get asked this question a lot of times, right? Oh, is there a checklist or is there a criteria? So what I tell them is like, there are a lot of reasons could be successful, and so there's actually no checklist, right? Because everyone has their own different characteristics, different background, right? And also even timing, right? The same person can be successful at this time, but not tomorrow, right? So, but one thing I see that's shared across all the successful entrepreneurs is that they're authentic, right? They're true to themselves, right? So, for example, you cannot just copy whatever Elon Musk is doing and expect yourself to be successful. Like talking about 220 all the time on Twitter, right? Because that's his background, that's his characteristic. He has to be this kind of influencer, right? And you look at another entrepreneur, like when we invest in Eric of Zoom, right? He's a totally different person. Like he's very down to earth and he's still engineering by heart. He still code everything himself and like to talk directly to the customers. Totally different personality from Elon Musk, and they are both very successful and build very good products, right? So, but one thing that share across them is that they are authentic to themselves. They are not faking themselves to say, oh, if I can fake myself to be like Elon Musk, then I'll get this money from VC. So this is one story one advice I keep giving my portfolio companies, right? You don't have to be liked by every VC. You just have to be loved by one VC, right? Because for Series A and beyond, you just need one lead investor, right? So whoever that really love true yourself is gonna be following you, and also no matter good time or bad times, and you need that kind of investor. So in order to attract that, it's actually harder than marriage, right? Because being an investor, you last longer than marriage. Average marriage, I think, is 7 years, but investment these days takes longer than 7 years. So it's actually worse than marriage, right? So when we invest in a company, I actually take a higher standard than choosing a wife, right? Don't tell my wife, she's not here, yeah. But your wife is here. Okay, so anyway, I'm sure you have a higher standard. But anyway, go back to the topic. So there's no one standard, everyone is different, but you have to be true to yourself, tell the true story, right? Tell your life story. And if you keep telling yourself and also others your true story, one day you will find your true love, right? Your true investor. And he or she gonna be supporting you no matter good time or bad time. Especially now, like beer markets, no company can raise money. But this time can really test if you really find a true love investor, right? Because you tell true story, they really believe in you, even if you have hard time. They have dry powder. They can support you through this bear market.
Thank you, Raj. And Kai?
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, of course, there are a lot of qualities that you look for in entrepreneur, right? Got to be scrappy, got to be a cockroach, got to be super smart, all of those things. But I would say almost the one thing, the theme that you could pull, right, as Rich was saying, from a lot of these great entrepreneurs that I've ever met, they're amazing storytellers. They can just tell amazing stories, right? Like, well, how do you get an investor to put money into your company? You got to tell a great story, right? If you can't tell a great story, an honest story, and a great story, you're not going to get money. And I think it goes beyond investors, right? You have to tell the investors a story, but you need people to work with you, right? And so if you can't tell a great story to the people that are working with you, then it's hard to hire the best people. And you have to tell a great story to customers, because your crap product nobody really wants to buy, but you have to sell that story to them, right? Like, why should I be buying your crap product? This is why you want to be buying this, right? And so that idea of storytelling to me has been very consistent as an investor now. And I look at some of the best founders that I've come across. It's like, wow, they just raised another round of funding. I thought they were dead, right? Like, there's no way. They're like almost out of money. Like, whoa, you pulled off, like somehow you raised another round of funding. That's storytelling, right? I've met founders who are like, we're kind of on the verge of like dying or out of money. And then all of a sudden they sell the company. And you're like, whoa, how did you pull that off, right? It's just amazing storytelling. And I don't mean storytelling in a bad way, honest, but in a good way, right? When you can convince investors to invest in your company, when you can convince employees or people to work with you, when you can convince customers to buy into your product or service, there's amazing storytelling there. And for me, that's the theme that I've seen in like just super great entrepreneurs. Like, I'll be like, whoa, I'll buy your product. Like, you'll give me 5 minutes, you'll tell me about your story, and I'll be like, oh man, that's amazing. Can I invest? Here's a check, right? And so think about, you have to be a great storyteller. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to be a great storyteller. You have to convince people about it and how to be honest and genuine about it, but you have to tell a great story. And that's, to me, one of the strongest skills that an entrepreneur founder should have.
Yeah. Thank you, Kai. And Fu-Fu?
Okay, I don't have to repeat what I already talked about. In a very high level, we are looking for someone, entrepreneur with passion and integrity. That's a very high level. And I hope they will enjoy, or they will own, but not enjoy. Enjoy, not 3P, 3Q. So 3Q is IQ, EQ, and SQ. And those in a high level. But then with those that we go into the more specific area, because it's knowing the business concept, as I mentioned earlier, that what to build on the marketing side aspect, as well as engineering and how to build it. And it's really important. You have to become a team leader. A startup is not a one-person game. So being able to build a team is critical. I see, especially in Eastern culture in Taiwan, even though I'm Taiwan, there's a lot of companies that build. It's kind of, you see the company just seeing one person. I think you really have to expand to a team to be really, see it really successful. Okay.
Thank you, Wu-Fu. Yeah. So if it's okay with you guys, are you able to share one particular investments that you are very proud of and why? We can start with Wu-Fu.
Well, I think most of the company I can start up, but as far as for investment, as I said, my history is so long now. I'm migrating from investor from kind of GP to become LP. So most of the investment are late. I don't have a lot of recent investment to talk about. But in earlier days, though, I guess the investment, I would say, you're talking about one example. I mean, investment, there's only small percentage are really successful. So luck is certainly part of investment. But so from investment, you're seeing going after a portfolio. You ideally, in early stage, you cannot investing too wide. I mean, you have to investing in an area you are familiar with, and with the portfolio, you're good. The hit ratio is what's important, rather than just, well, you will get one successful or get all successful is almost impossible. Because in early stage, you really don't know a lot of things to talk about other than believe that the entrepreneur or could do the job, and believe in the market direction and believe the execution of the entrepreneur. So, that's really more important rather than talk about a specific one success. Because usually one success, I think it's good. People, you talk about it, but that's not really, a big part is really luck. And what you'd like to see is seeing that a portfolio, what percentage of company are successful, and that's a good investment skill.
Thank you, Wu-Fu. And Kai?
Yes, so I think, I would echo that sentiment. And from an investment standpoint, I would say, my God, I'm a horrible investor. I'm an angel investor. And, I've invested in a fair number of companies at this point. And even after, all this time of investing, I will admit I still have literally no idea what I'm doing, right? At the earliest stages, it's so hard. The companies that, you invest in a founder and you invest in a space, but they're going to pivot and founders are going to change and all. There's just so much going on when you're an angel stage investor, right? Series A investor, Series B, Series C investor, very different criteria, very different outcomes that they're looking for. But at the angel stage, it's just, here's an idea on the back of a napkin. And to Wu-Fu's point earlier, it's really hard to, in my opinion, from my experience at least, same thing. It's really hard to pick out what exactly is going to be great. But I'm usually looking for those certain qualities. Super smart founders, obviously, right? Cockroaches, scrappy, passionate about what they're doing, can tell a great story. But I'll admit that picking winners is outrageously hard, and it is a power law. In the VC game, you do only need one or two winners. I just got to get my Google. I just got to get the Google, and then we're all set. But just one, right? But it is so hard. Man, it's hard in the early stages. So I don't have any great advice, but it's so hard.
Yeah. Talk about it. I didn't give out an example because he already mentioned. I happened to invest in Google in the first round. But of course, it's not the right investment. I say it's through the fund. I'm investing in that fund. And in fact, I did not want to be an investor. Actually, I was invited to join Sequoia as an investor. But I turned down because I didn't want to do investment. So, but I did put money in Sequoia, which invests in Google. or I mean, if I didn't sold it a long time ago, it's probably 3,000 return, 3,000 time return.
You just need the one, just one.
And Rich?
Yeah, I wish I could talk about Bitcoin, but I wasn't into Web3, which just happened. And I also didn't know why. It was also against all we just talked about, being how to identify a good founder, right? I wish I knew, Satoshi in person. Unfortunately, those are all against what we just talked about. So I'll pick the second best one, right? So it's a company called Vicarious Surgical. It confirmed all my hypotheses, like coming to a VC space and being humble, being naive, and trying to learn as much as I can. So it built a top. In terms of return on capital, it's not the most rewarding one, but in terms of learning, it maximized my learning and confirmed all my past journey as a venture capitalist, right? So if you think Vicarious Surgical, basically it's a surgical robot, went IPO last year, and I've been investing since 2016, right? So it took 5 years. It's not too long, shorter than my marriage, so it's better. But I'm still with him, right? Even after IPO, I truly believe they still have a lot of potential. But basically, if you think about it, I wasn't a CHEM medical professional. I didn't know robotics. I didn't know gears. I didn't know FDA. I didn't know any of them. But I still invested in this company because along the way, I learned everything through the journey, right? When we started the company, we named it Ame Cloud because we came from internet. We know maybe one thing or two things about cloud. And we kind of evolved from there. We started to learn AI, how AI can be applied in robotics. So we started to invest in autonomous driving. That got us into cruise. And then we got into, robotics can not only can be used in autonomous driving or warehouse, but can also be used in medical space. So that's how we got into other like diagnostics, AI in diagnostics, other surgical robots, and then we got to firsthand know the difficulty of handling like Web3. They just talk about regulatory pathway, like how to handle with the government, that kind of. We totally have a first-hand frustration with FDA, but we overcome that. We learn how to communicate with them. I totally agree with what they say. It's a skill set you have to learn. So we build on top of that. So we basically we learn, we make mistakes throughout a lot of failure. We combine all the learning we have and put it into Vicarious Surgical. So that founder, even though he's very young, he started his career by starting the company as well. But through our failure, he doesn't have to repeat our mistakes. He can build on top of us. Then we feel like we add value as a VC. It's not just free rider. That makes us feel very good, right? At least we contribute, right? Now we can claim we are value-add investor.
So back to that question of like how bad an investor I am, right? One of my investments, it's been earlier investments, been about 10 years, it's been a while, was in a company called Hammer and Chisel. And so they were doing, at that time, their whole theory was mid-core games. And mid-core games, it's not hardcore games, right? It's not like I'm logging on every night like Call of Duty and I'm going to play like 2 hours. And it's not casual games, right? Like a Candy Crush, but it's kind of right in the middle. It's like, okay, you have 30 minutes to spend, but you don't want like a silly little game, but you also don't want to invest in like all this time into a game. And so I was like, okay, that's a good idea, right? Like people could play, mid-core games on a tablet, maybe on a phone. There's probably PC gamers who aren't going to play, WoW, World of Warcraft, or LOL, or, Fortnite now, a whole bunch of different games, Roblox even, but who just want kind of a lighter experience. So they started one game, and then like a year, literally almost a year and a half later, they burned through like way too much money. You can imagine a game company, software developers, right? A year and a half just trying to develop a game, and they were like, "This game's not really working. We're abandoning the game." I'm like, "Whoa, okay, it's a lot of money to be spent to abandon the game." And they're like, "Oh, okay, we're gonna try this other game. Okay, cool." And it took them another year and a half to build that second game. And then they built the game, launched it, and it was actually a pretty cool game. It was a decent mid-core game. If you guys are familiar with League of Legends, it was essentially a LOL clone, right? A MOBA that you could play on a tablet rather than having to play on a PC. And then they launched it, and then it was good, but it wasn't good enough to be a company builder. It wasn't the kind of thing where it was like, okay, we can build a company on this. And then, so the founder, super smart guy, started a company before, OpenFaint, and sold it to Gree for $100 million. Before, it was his first company. It was like, okay, we're shrinking this company down to like 8 people, and we have to pivot and figure out what's next, right? Because startups have to pivot all the time. And then they pivoted, and then they went into like communications tools. I was like, communications tools? What is that? Like from gaming. And then they ended up going into communications tools, and they turned their basically company from hammer and chisel into, which is now Discord, right? And it was just one of those things where it's like I had, when you talk about it, going back to investor, I was like, I don't know anything about communications tools. I don't know anything about any of this stuff. And I'm a horrible investor. I never would have guessed that they would have gone there. But great founders are going to pivot, and they're going to, look at different areas and look at different markets. And somehow they went from 3 years of trying to launch, mid-core games eventually into, by their 5th year, they launched a communication tool, which, now is, doing pretty well. So it's just crazy, the startup journey. And as a seed stage investor, it's just really hard to pick like ideas, but you look for qualities and people that you can invest in that can pivot, as you were talking about, and can do different things and are smart about what business opportunities I need to look at, right? And survive.
Yeah.
Survive.
Thank you, Kai. Yeah, so moving forward into the post-COVID era, what technologies or areas do you think is going to explode in the next 5 years? We can start with Wu-Fu.
Well, I think they probably in the really high level, there are probably 2 drivers. What I could see is one is the global warming. That is one driver, and which also creating the need that creating a lot of application that to address this issue. The other area is this deglobalization, as I mentioned earlier. And that one will create huge impact in next, I think this thing will not stop. So it will continue on for a few years. So that create, or the supply chain where it gets divided into 2 pieces. And in order to solve the issue or address the issue, they require a lot of technology and effort into increase the efficiency and the supply chain. And global warming, of course, they need technology to in area about people use the ESG and to in the area to using green energy and also to try to address those social issues. So those in the high level. But in terms of specific technology, there's many technology are actually involved. Because the area I'm more familiar with the networking technology. And in the networking technology is a fundamental piece that's required. It's more in the infrastructure for many applications. For example, even going to from the real to virtual is a trend, which developing into the metaverse. Right? So networking infrastructure has the opportunity from the hardware IoT and all the way up is the cloud. The cloud is the newest one. Cloud piece, where important technology will develop really fast. And networking used to be doing the connectivity only, but right now networking is really addressing the application to application, the resource requirement, the interconnect and resource issue. So I think the application environment, or people call the cloud native application, which create a big, good, really opportunity in the next couple of years.
Thank you. And Kai?
Yeah, I would say I don't know if it's in the next couple of years, and most of you will probably roll your eyes and be like, oh God, he's talking about it again. But I do think like VR is potentially going to have its time in the next, you know, maybe within the next 5. I don't know if it's the next 2 to 3 years. You know, it's been talked about for a long time, and I feel like the technology, you know, wasn't quite there, and it takes a lot of these situations. It's like the technology doesn't quite catch up to the consumer side, the mass market consumer side, and I do feel like, you know, there's probably going to be a tipping point, and I guess the big talk is Apple, right? They're going to release something, and you know, maybe in the AR space versus VR, but I do feel like, and I have no insight into that, but it feels like at some point the technology is starting to catch up to the consumer mass market, and where it's really sort of poised to grow, in my opinion, is gaming. I mean, that's been my background, so I'm going to be a little bit biased in that. But when you look at a lot of different gaming companies, they're all talking about, right, metaverse, you know, XR, VR, whatever it is, right? And it takes content. In my opinion, I'm a content guy. You know, I'm not an infrastructure guy like Wu Fu, who knows everything about the infrastructure. I'm more of a content guy, and it takes, in my experience, it takes content to really drive adoption of different technologies, right? You have to have great content. And I feel like the content's kind of waiting out in the wings right now. It's already kind of there, and it just takes a couple of like technology advances, and then it's all of a sudden VR is just going to go boom, and it's going to be Ready Player One, and then we're all going to be living with headsets on like 18 hours a day. And just living in, you know, whatever verse you want to call it, right? But I do feel like I don't know if that's 2 or 3 years, but I feel like that's getting really, really close, you know, maybe 5.
Thank you, Kai. And Rich?
So maybe in the next few years, we're going to have this summit in Metaverse.
Probably.
Yeah, so everyone is wearing it.
You'll look real to me, but you won't be here in person.
I might look better. Yeah. That's what I hope. But looking forward, I think I'm still interested in digital health, mainly because it built on top of what I've learned in the past, and also given my personal experience in the past 3 years, I feel there's still a lot of problems to be solved, right? You would think about, like before COVID, you would think about, oh, probably all the health problems were already solved, right? We know the genomics, we can do like develop any antibody drugs, or we can do precision medicine, right? But COVID just exposed a lot of things we haven't really bring equality to, right? Especially in the United States. You think of how advanced this country, but how broken and or how vulnerable the healthcare system is, especially to some vulnerable population, right? It totally exposed this weakness. And this is what we have seen in internet, right? Internet bring equality to, you know, different population, like information right to different population. And I'll talk about Web3. We try to bring the equality to our financial service to different kind of people, right? I feel this should be done the same in healthcare, right? And not only like physical diseases, but also mental, right? I personally have very good experience with mental problem because, you know, before I thought I loved my kids to death, right? But having them 24/7 in the house while I'm trying to do my work totally drive me crazy, right? So I was about to go crazy, and I decided to fly back to Taiwan and spend, you know, a couple months there. That's where I, you know, hang out with Wu Fu and Kai. Yeah, not because I want, well, part of it that Kai probably want to have a better education or better, you know, experience for kids. But for me, it's just prevent myself being crazy and driven by my kids, right? So now, when you think about it, it's a virus driving the physical diseases, but actually also expose ourselves to how fragile our mental status, or how, this is basically modern diseases, right? Mental problem, and so new, right? We create a lot of technology. Those technology create new problem for us. So I think there's still a lot of opportunity, and also inequality in health. And I think digital, just like how we did the internet, this could be, again, how we bring equality through digital health experience.
Yeah, I think relative to my time at startups, which actually right now the opportunities, so many of them. I think it's it's almost everyone just you have the opportunity to do what you are good at and what you like to do. Really, you don't have to focus this one area because people think it's hard. And really, this opportunity is over a place, and that was a good thing. And that's why I think also in my old days, it's kind of shifting from the sense to sensibility. And the sense is more talking about infrastructure, more logical, more scientific or engineering oriented. The sensibility is what Kai is talking about, the content or the NFT, or those are a lifestyle. And those are the sensitivity parts harder to invest because it's harder to a hard yardstick to measure how much the value of that. But on the other hand, that's happening, the NFT and those things, and the gaming or whatever, starting a new trend, which opens up to people with sensitivity or emotional, motion type activities. But otherwise, my background is engineering. I'm not good at doing that. But still, I do see a shifting. Well, still, engineering part is still important. It's building an infrastructure, a solid infrastructure for those more creative, in terms of insensitivity people, creating those value content.
Thank you. Yeah, so our time is up. So thank you, Kai and Reg and Wufu for such insightful and interactive session. And please give a round of applause to our wonderful speakers today.